Hello, and welcome to Ending Physician Overwhelm. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Mello. I'm a family and obesity medicine physician, as well as a certified life coach for physicians. In this podcast, we talk about how the learned habits of people-pleasing, perfectionism, and a lack of boundaries show up in our lives and how they contribute to burnout, exhaustion, and overwhelm. The healthcare system is broken, my friends, but let's not wait for it to be fixed in order to feel better. Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of Ending Physician Overwhelm. I'm thrilled to have you join me today and excited to announce that I've got some new help on board. My son will be helping me with editing, and he just gave me some recommendations for a way to click record without making any sound. So if you notice the absence of sound, thank you, Elliot. Okay. Well, we're going to talk today about something I'm calling papercuts. And of course, we all have this idea, right, of death by 1,000 papercuts. This is a particular flavor of papercuts that comes to us when someone is expressing their displeasure in a way that is stinging, biting, it feels like a dig. And unfortunately, this happens more in medicine than certainly I would like. I think certainly more than any of us would like. And it just has been popping up as one of these little things that happens over and over and contributes to a negative experience for us. So today I'm going to share some examples of some recent things that have happened and some ideas with you about how do we want to approach this differently? Because, of course, I hear this all the time from, certainly from friends who are physicians, from clients who are physicians, right? There is this element of the reality of practicing medicine. And maybe it wasn't always this way. Maybe when doctors were treated differently, I don't know. I didn't practice 50 years ago, right? So I can't share that experience. I've never practiced, as a man or in a very white tower sort of setting. I don't know how this has been different over the eons. I just know what we experience right now. And I know that I'm not the only one who has this. So again, we're going to talk about a particular kind of papercut today. So I'm going to share a story. I'll probably share a few stories in this episode. I was working with someone who's been dealing with some chronic pain in multiple joints. It's unclear exactly what's been going on. It's been going on now I know precisely for about 16 months. But I had been trying to help this woman. We had been working together for a little under the 16 months, but trying to evaluate, trying to figure out, okay, like what's the source? Okay, let's try this. Let's try this. We, screened for some different things, just not really finding a clear cause of why she's feeling this way. And she has done a good job actually with lifestyle interventions. And finally I said, these tests are normal, but let's have a consultation with a rheumatologist, right? Someone who is experienced in weird inflammatory joint things, because it's multiple joints and I'm not entirely sure what's going on. And I put in a referral. Several weeks later, I gave the patient the information. Several weeks later, she gets back to me and she's like, well, I called them and they're not going to be able to see me until, sometime in September. Now, it is currently mid-July. This is a specialist. And in my area at present, just about any specialty, I'm looking at a minimum of 3 to 6 months for consults. Like, outside of sending somebody to the emergency room in a truly dire situation, it's just not possible to get somebody in with most specialties more quickly. Even cardiology, right? It's a thing. It's a thing that's going on, right? It's a thing that happened before the pandemic. It certainly got worse during. So she tells me, yeah, I can't be seen until the end of September. And I responded to her and I said, well, I know that's longer, than you would like for it to take. I know this has been going on for a while. In my experience, that's that's not a terrible wait time given the circumstances, and you're welcome to call around and find out if you can be seen sooner. But I think that's pretty good. And she responded to me with one line, and she said, well, that means I'll have been in pain for 16 months at that point. And that's all she said. And I had just come back from vacation, and I read this line, and I was like, ouch, right? It stings. It stings. Because the implication there is that I'm keeping her in my mind. Now, I'm going to recognize that this is not the thought that everybody has, but I know that a lot of us who are listening have a similar thought pattern when they hear something like that, when they hear, that means I'll have been in pain for 16 months. My immediate, highly practiced reaction is, ouch, she's blaming me for her being in pain. Like, it's my fault that she's having to wait, that she's been in pain this long. She's inconvenienced by having to, wait what's, I don't know, 2.5 months from now. She's upset. I should be doing something differently. I should be doing something different, right? I have all of these internalized thought patterns that lead me to see that sentence written down and make it mean that I'm done something wrong. And this happens to us over and over and over again, right? Where we get these little dig statements. It's not usually someone yelling at us or, screaming at us, or it can be a sentence in a portal message, right? But it's the sting. And again, we've internalized often this train of thinking that immediately takes us to this place where I've done something wrong. I'm not doing enough. I'm not a good enough doctor. I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't even be practicing medicine. I should, go and do something else. I'm just such a bad person. It's a really common, very destructive thought pattern. The sentence that she said, is like a paper cut, right? But our internal dialogue that follows that, right, for many of us, ends up creating a quite deep wound, right? Because it's multiple paper cuts like that happen over and over and over again. Think about other statements that you've seen recently or heard recently from patients, or, it could even be from staff, where the actual words that were said or written aren't particularly vitriolic, or sometimes they will be, but it might be something like, well, you didn't have an opening, and so I couldn't get care. Well, you told me that this was going to be okay. Well, why didn't you do this thing? And somebody calling in recently, she's going to be traveling. She wanted to get malaria prophylaxis pills. My front desk staff told her appropriately, as according to policy, we don't do travel medicine consults, because of course she probably doesn't just need malaria pills, right? She needs someone to sit down with her, look at where she's going, decide, is she up to date with this, right? And we don't do that anymore in our office because we don't get paid and people get upset about having to pay cash for that. But we have a lovely, lovely local pharmacy that does, great consultations for that for flat fee. And they, prescribe and they give vaccinations, like they do it all, and they do a great job. So she was referred to that. And her statement to the staff was, well, I don't understand why she just can't prescribe me malaria pills. Sting, 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 right? Paper cut. There are so many instances of this, right? We could share stories all day of little biting statements that people say to us, or like I said, they write in portal messages. And again, if you're like me, you're used to internalizing that and making it mean all sorts of things about the care that you provide. And it's so not helpful. And it is absolutely feeding into burnout, distress, dislike of our jobs. So I want us to recognize, if this is you, right, if you internalize messaging that isn't even quite being said from these papercut statements. Let's talk more about what's actually going on. And I'll sort of share the process that I went through when I saw that statement, right? I've been in pain for 16 months. It is normal human behavior. It's not terribly helpful or adaptive human behavior, but it is normal human behavior that when people are in distress, pain, overwhelm, worry, fear, anxiety, that they're looking to discharge those uncomfortable emotions, right? We know that from our side of things, right? When we are feeling those things, how do we try and move those emotions out of our body, right? But the humans in front of us who are seeking care, trying to get help, they're in some kind of distress, right? Outside of coming in for, wellness visit, prenatal care, something like that, right? They're usually coming in with pain, with uncertainty, with some kind of distressing symptom, with a diagnosis that they're worried about, with uncertainty. They are coming in with uncomfortable things going on physically, emotionally, right? And they have physical sensations sometimes, right? But they have their emotions. And humans don't like having those negative emotions. We don't like sitting in them. We're often not well-resourced, frankly, to be able to deal with them. So when patients are experiencing distress and they perceive you as, being a part of the reason why they can't get immediate relief of whatever is going on, again, whether that's pain, worry, crippling anxiety, uncertainty over a diagnosis, when they see you as part of the barrier to getting immediate relief of their symptoms, they will sometimes lob painful paintballs at you in an attempt to discharge their distress, right? So the patient who's like, well, you didn't have any appointments, so I couldn't get care. Think of that like a paintball splashing against you, right? And covering you with yuck. Whether or not they're intending to be mean, whether or not they're intending to hurt your feelings, I want you to step back and be able to see that this is a human in some kind of distress and they are dealing with it in a way that's not terribly helpful. It's not terribly collaborative or supportive, but they are trying to discharge their distress. And when I say recognize that, I don't mean accept it. I don't mean that it's okay. I don't mean that doesn't mean, you can't have any boundaries or ideas or, kind of have a good approach to it. All I mean is I want you to see them as a human who's in distress and they are trying to discharge it. This is, of course, not a new idea, but sometimes we need a reminder, especially in these situations when there's nothing urgent, dangerous, terribly worrisome going on. Or maybe there is. Let's just say it's not a life-threatening, immediate sort of situation. The patient wants something or perceives that something will make them better, right? They want an immediate appointment. They want immediate lab results back. They want to go get an MRI because their head hurt yesterday. They think that prednisone is going to help them, and it's not. They think that opiate pain medicines are going to help, and it's not. They don't understand why you won't just refill their Xanax, right? There's a number of things, right, that patients perceive would be an immediate, great solution that may or may not be appropriate, or you're not available, and they think that you're the only way they can get care, which is completely untrue. There are so many scenarios like this, and unfortunately, people are just very willing to discharge their distress by lobbing these paintballs at you. And again, I just want us to acknowledge that, and I want us to start seeing, kind of those statements, those paper cuts, for what they are. They are a person trying to discharge distress. Now, it doesn't mean that I have to, walk around covered in paint, right, from all these paintballs. It doesn't mean that I can't protect myself. It doesn't mean that I can't set reasonable boundaries, that we can't have policies in place. It doesn't mean that I should be available to them 24/7, right? Because that's impossible. But I want us to recognize that this is a coping mechanism. This is a human trying to discharge their distress the same way that a hurt animal, who is otherwise loving and friendly, might bite you in their distress, right? Because they are feeling threatened. When I stepped back in this particular situation, and thought about this patient, it's not the first time that she's said things to me like that. We've had some quite lovely interactions. I think she's a rational human being. I got the sense from her chart, from her past records, that she has been difficult to work with. And so I don't think that this is new. She's had a number of moderately difficult, sort of health and issues going on, and some social stressors. I can now see her as someone who doesn't tolerate, discomfort, uncertainty. She's not really doing it in a way that I would consider fair. Okay, that's fine. What I chose to do after I kind of recognized that she was trying to like discharge some of her, upsetness at not being able to be seen, within a week, which again, not reasonable. We know that there's nothing dangerous going on. She's choosing to like lob a hurtful statement at me. And, so I acknowledge, yep, this is kind of how she is. It didn't fall, kind of above the line, of like, yeah, you need to be, fired from my practice. Like, it didn't fall across that line of, yeah, I'm going to discharge you from my practice. But it also was not a behavior that I wanted to reinforce. I didn't want to get into more back and forth with her. I didn't want to accept the blame. I didn't want to say, oh, I'm so sorry. I'd already expressed empathy for her situation. I'd already expressed that, yeah, it's unpleasant to have to wait. So I just dunned the message and just acknowledged, yeah, okay, that happened. And I'm moving on. I'm not saying that it didn't sting, and I'm not saying that I didn't go through that same chain, but if I can separate myself from the situation a little bit and just see her as a human who's in distress and going through unpleasant things, it's like, okay, all right, well, you're choosing to, try and throw some blame onto me. It's not my fault that you have pain. It's not my fault that we haven't been able to find out what's going on, right? I've done things within my scope. I have seen her not come in for multiple months, and then she comes in and she's like, I've just been in pain this whole time. And it's like, yeah, and you didn't come in. I didn't see you, like, like you didn't give me an opportunity to work with you. Okay, right. I can look at all of that and just be like, yeah, okay, she's a human who's having some discomfort. I get it. A part of this practice too, outside of recognizing that this is just normal human behavior and that people will say all kinds of crappy things to you, quite honestly, is deciding for ourselves, what do I want to reinforce? What do I want to reinforce in myself? What do I want to reinforce in other people? So going back to the patient who just wanted malaria pills, the manager in our office, kind of shared the experience with me because it wasn't all written down in this patient's chart, and, shared that they had told the patient that they would communicate to me that she just wanted malaria pills, and they would get back to her if I said something different, right? So they kind of left it of, we don't expect that she's going to come back and just give you malaria pills. We've explored, kind of like these are your options. And, our clinic doesn't provide this kind of care. And here you go, right? Here's a great solution for you. But we'll let you know if Dr. Mello says anything different. And I took a moment, I thought about it. And, it's relatively easy for me to prescribe, whatever the latest malaria treatment is, right? I have to look it up. It would be relatively easy for me to prescribe her that medicine, reach out to her, and then most likely we'd get into a back and forth because I would probably have questions. Hey, where are you going? How long are you going to be there? We would have to go through those things. I'd have to be thinking, I know I would have to be thinking, okay, well, do you need anything else? Do you need traveler's diarrhea, medications just in case that happens? Do we need to update any any vaccinations, right? I would very easily be pulled into doing a travel medicine consult and probably doing so through the portal in a way that I wouldn't get paid. And I thought about it for half a second, and then I was like, I don't want to reinforce this patient. And I've had experiences with this particular patient before and her partner, and they were fairly mixed, but a lot of sort of, kind of mean statements to the staff. And I thought about it and was like, I'm not going to bend over backwards here. It's relatively simple for me to prescribe malaria prophylaxis, but I don't want to reinforce the behavior that the way for you to get what you want is for you to call and, be sort of rude to the staff and demanding. I don't want to reinforce that that's the way that you get care in my office. I don't want to reinforce that to the staff that they should, just kind of tolerate it. I don't want to reinforce it in myself that I should feel obligated to provide care because, of course, in my more comprehensive style, right, I know I would get pulled into doing more. And I choose not to do that. I know this patient, I know her circumstances, I know that she can afford to do a very simple travel consult and, get the appropriate treatments, get everything, sort of lined up and talk with an expert who does this all day, all the time, and doesn't even have to look it up probably. I know that she can access that. She doesn't want to. She thinks I should just do this for her. She thinks if she yells at the staff, right, and it's just rude and just says, well, I don't understand why you can't do this, that we will just roll over and do that for her. And this is definitely a first world problem, right? This problem that I'm expressing of like, I don't want to reinforce that behavior, right? I know that I'm in a circumstance and I know that she can afford to do something different. So I don't want to suggest that like this is the way that we always do things because I know many of us practice in different circumstances, but I don't want to set up the expectation that that is how people get care. And I don't want to perpetuate the feeling in myself of feeling like I've been taken advantage of when all of a sudden I am spending lots of time with this patient and multiple patients over and over and over again, always doing things, when I'm not going to get paid for that. And I'm doing more than is reasonable. Like I'm doing things that should be done inside of a visit and I'm not getting paid. And I will feel taken advantage of. I'm choosing not to reinforce the behavior that leads me to continue to feel like I'm dying a death of 1,000 paper cuts. I'm going to tie that back to the paper cuts theme. So many of us struggle with these episodes, and we're completely normal humans who are trained to be people pleasers, right? Trained to want to make others happy. We have sometimes learned that it's not safe, that we're going to get yelled at, that we're going to be censured, we're going to be belittled, if we don't comply with what people want, right? We've received that from people who were in charge of us. We've received that from patients. We've received that from leadership at times. We may have grown up with some of that. We may feel in our bodies that it is unsafe to say no, to set boundaries, to, set reasonable expectations, and that our goal is just to serve other people. And this is just another example of how we can start to move away from that tendency, right? The paper cut will still happen because people will still say jerky things. Now, if I'm reinforcing that I don't really accept, I don't cave in is not quite the right word, but like I don't become fawning in response to people saying things like that. I don't say, oh, I'm going to try and get you in more quickly. Oh, sure, I'll prescribe those malaria pills. Oh, sure, I'll stay late and see you. And, oh, sure, I'll do all this work on my off hours and not, not expect to be compensated for it. If I want to let go of feeling like I'm dying a death of 1,000 paper cuts, right, then I'm not going to continue to reinforce those behaviors for myself or for them. It doesn't mean that I don't feel the sting, right? You will still feel the sting when people say things. You will still feel bad when something bad happens to someone. You will still wish that people didn't have the chronic pain or the severe anxiety or, whatever is going on for them. But we are not responsible for most of the things that happen to other human bodies. We are not able to find everything in early stages before people feel any discomfort. We are not always able to immediately, determine the source of their discomfort or relieve their discomfort. We are not responsible for the years and years and years of the way someone has lived their life. And now there's all this disease and, disorder in their organs and, and they're uncomfortable and it's hard to do, it's hard to reverse those things. And they don't like taking all those medicines. We are not responsible for all of that. We are expert consultants who are here to, provide care. We need time and space and rest in order to be able to do that at a high level. We need to set limits and boundaries. We need to take great care of ourselves, right? And you can see that when these paper cuts arrive, right, we are inclined to internalize it, and we need to recognize that tendency and be able to, sort of step back from it to be able to see that this patient is like trying to lob paintballs at us, right? Trying to be rude, mean, trying to discharge their discomfort. Right. And deciding for ourselves, what am I going to reinforce and what am I not going to reinforce? What am I going to internalize? Is there some learning or growth here? There might be some, right? There might be some learning or growth here for me. I might choose to do something in a different way. I might choose to set some limits. I might choose to have a conversation. Hey, it's not okay to yell at the staff like that. Hey, the way we have a policy that we don't provide this or we do provide that. Hey, I want to acknowledge that it's hard to wait for a specialty consult. I could choose to learn and do something differently, but I'm not going to accept the blame or the responsibility for everyone's disease, everyone's distress, everyone's sense that I am withholding something from them by quote unquote not being available for them or not prescribing them the opiates that they want or the Xanax or, not being able to immediately get them an MRI from a clinic, right? Like I don't have a bat phone. I can't order a specialist to see you. I can't order an immediate MRI in my setting. No, you're going to have to face the discomfort of going to the emergency room if you really think that that's what's going on. And they may still say no. I can't materialize a specialist for you. There are so many examples that we could share, right? And I'm sure that you all have stories, right, where patients have just made these statements that are typically, they're not necessarily deeply harsh, but they sting, and they sting over and over and over again. And we just carry them until they become deep, welting wounds. Let's not do that anymore. Next time that happens, or you can even think about a recent experience, really sit down with that and think, okay, what was going on? What was actually said? What did I make it mean? What was the patient experiencing? Can I see them as a human being who's doing a not very helpful thing of trying to like throw a paintball at me in hopes that they'll feel better or hopes that it will open something that they think that they want right now, which is not currently available to them? Can I look at this and see, is there any behavior that I need to reinforce or stop reinforcing for myself, for them, for staff? Like, what is that? This is how we undo some of the distress that we feel. It's not a perfect solution because there is no perfect solution, right? We will not live and work in a world where patients don't say these things to us ever, where we don't get disappointed or worried or upset in response to something that we're seeing, right? We're not going to love all the humans who come to see us. We're not going to get along with them 100% of the time. They're not always going to be grateful or thankful to be in front of us. They're not always going to be excited to come in and do their wellness visit or, hear the bad news that we have to share with them. Bad stuff's going to happen, and it's going to just be a reality. And so if we want to stay in medicine, we need to learn not to toughen up, man up, like all of that. That's not helpful. We're humans. We have emotions. We need to process them. So this is an opportunity for us to do that so that the burden of the work that we do just feels lighter. It's never going to be an easy job. It's never going to be an easy job. You're going to have some days that suck. You're going to have hopefully some days that are good and some encounters that are good and some encounters that suck. Some results that you are excited about, some results that you are not excited about, some conversations you do not want to have, and some conversations that you're so glad that happened, right? We know that that is the reality. So utilize this process to help yourself get some of those paper cuts off of your back. All right, I'm going to stop chattering. Thank you as always for listening. Thank you to Elliot for your tech advice. We'll see how that works. And until I talk to you next time, have a great week. Take care. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you as always for listening. To learn more about my coaching programs, head to www.healthierforgood.com. And if you love this podcast, please drop us a review on iTunes or support the show by clicking the link in the show notes. Until next time, take care.